Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Your issues, your psychology, that is what we talk about. Hopefully we can do it in a little bit more comprehensive way and let you know what's, really going on. Is there a mental health crisis going on in America? It depends how you define crisis, but it would make sense. Right? It would make sense that there would be some kind of mental health crisis because we don't really know how psychology works. I mean, would there be a boiler explosion crisis in America if we didn't know how boilers work? If people who were in charge of boilers, you went to them and asked them what was going on, they said, well, every boiler's different. You can't really say exactly what that one pipe does in that one situation. Who knows? It's hard to make generalizations. We don't want to make any boiler. We don't want to invalidate any boiler's personal experience by saying that, well, maybe you're like other boilers. Of course, there'd be an issue of boilers exploding. And that's what we're working on here. Just coming up with more fundamental, not rules so much, but guidelines of how your psychology works. I don't think it's complete, of course, but if I can do that and communicate to you an ever clearer picture of how emotions work, how they specifically manifest and specific neuroses in your life, procrastination, whether that's an issue, or girls or work, or how do I define what I even want to do. We're going to get to it today. I think there's a more fundamental way of looking at those issues. When we deal with those fundamental issues, then the resulting symptom most likely, just generally it takes care of itself. Thank you, 700 subscribers. Talking to more and more people here. I mean, this is what I like. I'd be happy with 5 subscribers, not 4. I'd be very unhappy with 4, but 5 subscribers would be fine. There should be, I don't know if this is me making excuses. It probably is. Here, watch me make excuses. There should be, okay, so in boxing, it's hard to say who's the best boxer of all time. It's pound for pound, right? Pound for pound, the best boxer of all time. That's what really counts. Not overall who's the best or who would beat who. I mean, Manny Pacquiao versus Mike Tyson. Clearly not a boxer here. I don't know too much about it, but clearly Tyson would win, but that's not a fair comparison. There should be a subscriber count to boring ratio. It's like, well, he doesn't have a lot of subscribers really, but he's really boring. He just drones on and on. In fact, his channel is kind of a replacement for ASMR recordings. Listen to it to get to bed. I take that as a compliment, because if you can listen to this and fall asleep, then that means I'm essentially hugging you. I'm comforting you with my thoughts. And you wouldn't be comforted by those thoughts if they weren't totally correct. Like, oh, at least somebody's out there making sense. I think that's really why these podcasts are ASMR. Nothing to do with the perhaps droning nature of my voice. So thank you, 700 subscribers. That's awesome. This is mostly going to be a Q&A episode, although I do have another issue here to get to, which is kind of a question that I received it this week, but it comes up a lot. So it's just something to talk about. I do discuss it in my book, but I'm going to elaborate on it, and that is the issue of a want versus a need. Often when we're managing our issues, what some guys need to do, at least in part, is to get better at looking at their own needs. Get better at managing their own anger, communicating their needs in a better way. For whatever reason, we feel like our needs don't matter. We feel like, who am I to have a need? Or if I had a need, or if I had some sort of, if I just felt that my needs were important, I don't know how else to say it, then it would just be a burden on other people. I don't want to be entitled. Perhaps you're a millennial and you want to go against type and you don't want to be entitled. Oh, I don't have needs. Oh, I'm fine. Everything's fine, right? The dog in the burning house with the cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is what makes that meme. I'm fine. Right? I think a lot of people struggle with that. But there's a meta point here, and that is, how do you even tell if a need is really a need? How do you distinguish, in a sense, between wants and needs? Now, in the book, I talk about how, well, if you have a want, so a want is something that wouldn't really be good for you. It's just like a quick fix, short-term solution. A need would be something that would, in a sense, be more in line with your values, more in line with what you, quote, really need, as opposed to a want, which is, you don't really need it, but it's just kind of something nice. Does it really matter? Well, I would say if you have a difficult time with this issue, you have to look at your needs. If you want to get through this issue, and you want to get more in touch with what you really need and be able to distinguish that, ultimately what we're talking about here is a boundary issue. How do we delineate your identity in a better way, so you have a better time. Yeah, so it's easier to distinguish between a want and a need. At a certain point, you just have to take every want or need. Don't even make that split. Everything that you, quote, want is a need. Now, it may not be a real need. Maybe you want to move to another city. It may not be what you really need, but it sounds like it's something you need to explore to do what, right? A better delineate your identity, but better solidify your identity, so you're going to be in a better place in the future to just be able to figure out what you want and need. And it's very similar to, like, what dads say: if you don't have a job, you do have a job, because if you don't have a job, then your job is getting a job. And then that's the same thing with developing your wants and needs. If you don't know what you really want or what you really need, and it's confusing, then your need at that point is to figure out what your needs are. And there's lots of ways to do this, like just boundary testing. I mean, this is what teenagers do, right? This is why teenagers will dye their hair and do a bunch of crazy things. They're essentially trying on different identities, and it's really healthy. I mean, it's not so healthy looking back and thinking, oh God, I can't believe I did that to my freaking hair. I actually succumbed to that style. I was wearing those, whatever, a beaded shell necklace, that's my generation. So it's very unhealthy looking back and feeling that regret and all that embarrassment, but it's healthy at the time because, hey, am I a beaded shell necklace guy? I don't know, but I'm engaging in this process. So in 5 or 10 years, I'm going to be trying out maybe different classes in college, or reading different books, or trying an internship and saying, am I the guy who works in marketing? Is this something, it's the same kind of process. It just emotionally, fundamentally, it's the same thing. I mean, it looks very different, but it's fundamentally the same thing. So, just learn different information. That's another great way of building up your boundary is in an intellectual way, is learning information. Learning about that thing you're not too sure about. Reading books. I mean, that's the obvious one. But also just asking people. If you want to move to a different city, ask people who live there, right? Just gather information. But at a certain point, you can't really know until you try. But it's in the trying that you can, put yourself up to the next step, the next echelon of psychological awareness, from which you're going to be that much more sure about what your needs really are. But a lot of this, I mean, especially when we have anxiety about having needs, it's really anxiety about existing. Do you have the right to exist? I mean, that is the fundamental question of your psychological health. Do you have the right to exist? Does your sexuality have the right to exist? Do you have the right to money if you work for it? I mean, it almost seems like, oh, of course I have a right to exist. I mean, do you? Do you really think that? Do you really act that? Most likely you don't. And to some degree. I mean, I sure don't. But it's about working through these issues. Everything's a microcosm of how do you develop interest in a career? You just pick something? No, you kind of put your psychic tentacle feelers out there, and maybe I'll read this book, maybe I'll talk to this person, and it's kind of a slow process. I know when you feel frustrated, but not being able to distinguish a want from a need, it's frustrating, right? I just got to know the right answer. Well, it doesn't work like that. Sorry, it's not that. It may be that simple, but it's going to take some time to figure out. So, develop an interest, talk to people, get an internship, work in a certain field, and slowly but surely, you start to work on your needs. I mean, the worst thing you do is you kind of put your needs aside and placate other people's needs implicitly, maybe just their implicit needs, and then you get to the place in your life where you really need to make a decision, right? Is this girlfriend right for me? I think we talked about that last week, or we're talking about that. No, we talked about that last week, I think, or maybe 2 weeks ago. Is this girlfriend right for me? It's like, well, yeah. Now you're in a situation where you really need to know what your needs are. But for the past 5 or 10 years, you've kind of been putting that off. So you're in this new emotionally stressful situation because you've been saying, I'm fine for the past 10 years. Maybe you weren't fine. Maybe you've just been tuned out from yourself. Yeah, that's why I have the girlfriend plan. I know I talk about that. You have to date at least 12 girls over 12 months. I don't mean have sex, but at least date a girl for a month. Get to know enough girls on that level, on that romantic level, and you start to figure out what would be a good situation for you. You're not figuring out the girl so much. You're figuring out who you are in context with the girl. And then, of course, there's anxiety around having needs in the first place. At a certain point, you simply need to decide and accept. And part of working through the anxiety is accept that you don't know if it's going to be the right decision. Nobody really knows, right? But you just have to go with it and see what you learn, right? Do not make good decisions. You're not going to make good decisions. You can get good at making decisions, though, and that is make a decision, learn whatever you can. Okay, I learned A, B, and C, and move on. I look back in my life, and whenever I think that I failed, or whenever things weren't working out, as long as I look back on that experience and got some lesson, even if it's just one lesson or part of a lesson, and I put that lesson in context of what I think I lost by making a, quote, bad decision. And, just looking back on, I was going to say how short my life was. I'm becoming an old man over here. But looking back, it's so clear, it's so obvious looking back that the lesson is more than worth the price of that experience, or the price of what I consider to be a failure. And it was a failure at the time. I mean, let's not mince words. But the lesson that you get from that is like, oh my God, I'm so glad I had that failure because I learned A, B, and C. That's not making good decisions, right? That's just getting good at making decisions. So that's how you distinguish between your wants and your needs, right? Just start small. It's okay to mess up. You're going to go after things and it's not going to work out. Just bring awareness to each situation. Read books, talk to people, whatever the decision is. And that's how you do it. It's not a short process. This is a process that we all work on for the rest of our lives, but that's how you do it. It's like, oh, I need a girlfriend this year. My goal is to get a girlfriend this year. It's like, dude, you haven't been on a date in 3 years. Your goal is not to get a girlfriend. Your goal is to figure out who you are in relationship with girls, so you can get to the place where you can make a better decision about what would be a good girlfriend for you. Doesn't mean the decision is going to be that great. But you can at least get to the place where you're like more in tune with, oh yeah, I'm going after the girl who has a certain color hair because that's just what I want, and it has nothing to do with the fact of like, oh, my friends will think I'm cool. Okay, yeah, so that's another facet of this that I didn't even have here, but it comes down to something I talk about, somewhat of a theme here is, are you pursuing pleasure or avoiding pain? And oftentimes when you're in avoidance mode, when you have been for such a long time, avoiding pain feels a lot like pursuing pleasure, right? Like the relief of not having pain. We just kind of mix those two up in our mind and we go around, we think we're doing what we, quote, want. It's not what we want. It's what we want to avoid. And those are two very different things. And it's like, I can just explain it to you intellectually, just so you can listen to this and be on the lookout for it in your life. That's all I can really do. But really, it's about you getting in tune emotionally with, this just doesn't feel right. Oh, yeah, I'm avoiding pain. Okay, here I'm avoiding A, B, and C. Not really a need. Just something I, quote, want to distract myself from other issues I have going on. Right? If you're going to make a decision, if you're going to get a girlfriend or a wife and she's going to ruin your life, that's what you're going to do. Here I am with my crystal ball, Nostradamus predicting the future. If you get a wife and it doesn't work out, it's because you picked her to avoid issues going on in your life. You picked her to cover up insecurities most likely that you had. Not because you liked her. Because you didn't like yourself and you want to distract yourself from that. Now, that's not going to be made obvious until maybe 5, 7, 10 years when the marriages usually fall apart. And you don't really know. I'm married. Did I pick my wife to cover up for insecurities? Maybe. Maybe I did. We're not... Nobody's completely immune to doing this. So you got to be vigilant. You just got to be in tune. And it doesn't involve a lot of work. It just involves just not constant focus, just consistent focus on your issues. And that's easier to do when we know how the boiler works. All right, so I have some questions here. This first one isn't really a question. It's more of a compliment. Yeah, these softball questions, keep them coming. These compliments that I get, I love these. And it's not really a question, it's just he notices how my theory works with attachment theory, or my unification of psychology, how it works with attachment theory. So secure attachment would be confrontation of anxiety as asserting the anger. Yeah. Insecure, resistant attachment would be helplessness, hostility. That's using your anxiety to be helpless. That's using your anger for hostility. It's essentially having the emotion saying, here, you deal with it. That's, in a sense, insecure, resistant attachment. Then, of course, avoidant attachments. That's avoiding the emotion. And it's too bad because people think that the alternatives here are helplessness, insecure, or avoidant. And if those are your two options, if those are your two ways of managing emotions, like I can't be a guy, I can't be emotional. If I'm a guy and I'm emotional, people think I'm weak. No, that's just because every guy you've seen up until this point who is, quote, emotional, they handle their emotions in an insecure, resistant way. Being helpless. Oh, my experience. Oh, look at me. Look how different I am. That's emotionalism. I'm using this emotion to get attention and to distance myself from other people. That is supremely unattractive if you're a guy. You can get away with it if you're a girl, function of how attractive you are. But if you're a guy, yeah, you cannot get away with that. So what do guys do? They say, okay, well, emotions are bad. Going to read Stoicism, Seneca, philosophy built on slavery in a sense, psychological slavery. So I know you'd be avoidant, and this is how we get a lot of maybe less than helpful dating advice. Yeah, so that's not how I developed the theory, but I mean, I think that's one indication that it is somewhat of a good theory. I don't think it's complete, but it's at least a good step in the next direction. It would be very, I don't like the word arrogant as a pejorative. It would just be dishonest to say it's a complete theory. I don't know. It's like to say that your decision is ultimately good. I don't know. I just made the best decision. I picked the wife that I thought was good. I could be wrong. Who freaking knows? I picked a career that I thought, it was in line with me, what I thought I would be good at. Who knows? But you can just do the best that you can at the time, and again, go on to learn whatever you can learn. How did I get? Oh yeah, so I don't know if it's complete. This is my roundabout way of saying that. Yeah, what else here? Yeah, so that's not how I came up with the theory. No, I came up with the theory. I mean, I go back, talk about in my 2 emotions video. That was the starting point of it, is just realizing that, look, emotions are biological concepts. Or I read this book that said a biological construct wouldn't be a biological construct unless it was teleological. It just wouldn't exist. It was kind of it was a dissertation kind of combining biology and philosophy. I'm like, well, emotions are biological. They must be teleological. Therefore, you can only go towards the goal or away from a goal. Maybe we only have 2 emotions. That's really where I got it from. And then the 3 different ways of handling emotions, that's just from basic game theory. And I'm not a game theory expert. I just know something about it. Enough to patch together some sort of theory. So yeah, thank you for noticing that. Yeah, it's I think it's a decent sign of a theory when you develop it and then it explains more than you previously thought. Like I always say about suppression, repression, and then neuroses and then psychoses. That's a common way of categorizing different ways of managing emotions, I guess you could say, and it falls in line exactly with my theory. All right. So that was not so much a question, but hey, Mark, attaboy. Appreciate those. I need all the affirmation I can get. Need all the attention I can get. Next question is about why do people read tabloids? And, the guy knows enough about what I say to say, well, it's a distraction. Yeah, it's a distraction, but why would people believe them? And I think he's talking about it specifically in, just the media hysteria going on. I don't want to get too political, but, maybe recent events. Maybe there was one event a couple weeks ago, and then maybe there's some virus that people are afraid of. Why do people, we all have the sense that the media lies. Why do we buy into it? Well, yeah, it's a distraction, but why is it so distracting? Why would the media playing up any certain recent events, possibly, I'm not saying that's what's going on, why would it be so distracting? I mean, this goes back to what I talked about with the secondary emotional payoff. Emotions are chemicals in your brain. We become addicted to certain It's just chemical arrangements in our brain. It doesn't have to feel good. You think heroin feels good? It doesn't. We'll go back to avoiding pain versus pursuing pleasure. It feels extremely not bad. And that's not the same as feeling good. And that's what fear is. That's what self-pity is. You know, when you read or watch CNN or Fox News and everything's going bad and they show half of a block of New York City and they just assume that it's the entire city, that's what's happening. And that's a lot of self-pity. That's a lot of, oh, what's the point of trying anyways? Now I have an excuse. Now I have a reason, right? Like, so let's say you don't have a job and you're supposed to send out your resume 5 times and you only sent your resume out 2 times that day. Okay, well now I have a really good reason, right? Because look at what's happening to America and everything's just going to crap. And I'm not saying that civilizations don't decline. Of course they do. I think America is in the midst of a decline, but of course in that decline there's a lot of opportunity. Civilizations come and go, individuals live on. You know my view on that. So we just get put in these payoffs. Fear is a very powerful payoff, a distraction from your issue, a distraction from doing what you really need to do. Self-pity is a big one. Nostalgia, a big one. You know, nostalgia is a form of self-pity. You know my views on that. So it's like asking why do people get hooked on the media? It's like asking, well, why do people get hooked on heroin? Because it's a great emotional distraction. And this isn't to criticize these people, right? How do we get through this? It's not to say, oh, look how bad you are. Look how stupid. Oh, you actually believe Fox News. Oh, you actually believe CNN. No, it's about realizing how we do it too. You know, how we get our hit of victimization or self-righteousness or self-pity or nostalgia. It's how we do that. Now, maybe we're not doing it in response to recent events, but you're doing it to something. I know you are. Do you feel tuned out? Are you isolated? Well, guess what? You are rewarding yourself for having an unhealthy relationship with reality. Not only is an unhealthy relationship painful, but it just doesn't work. It simply does not work in the long term. You must, if you've been doing it for a while, if you haven't been facing your issues, if you haven't been facing reality for a while, you have tricked yourself into giving yourself a reward for tuning out. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. It would just be painful. You'd be like, oh God, I gotta stop doing that. That's why these things happen. I mean, that's why the media is just so alluring. Fear, that's a common thing. Like, people are distracted with fear. Fear is a great motivator, but just fear feels good. Doesn't feel good, again, sorry, it just feels not bad. So that's why. And just relate to what's going on. Maybe you're not freaking out about recent events, but is there something in your life that you did freak out about unnecessarily to feel the self-pity, to feel the woe is me, to feel like a victim? Yeah, I've done it. I do it 3 times before breakfast. So maybe I'm not freaking out about the media right now and what's going on, but I freak out about other things. So it's about turning the attention back on you. And yeah, and then of course the meta point is people look at how other people are distracted by the media, and then they get the same payoff that people get who are distracted by the media. It's like just the payoff just once removed. It's like, well, you're doing the same thing that people who watch CNN all day. When you go on Twitter and complain about people who watch CNN, you are the same. You are doing the same thing psychologically as people watching CNN all day. You have a lot more in common than you think. And realizing that, of course, like all boilers are, the concretes are a little bit different, but in general, boilers are all kind of the same. Same thing with people. And that's one of our ways through this. That's one of our ways to recognize our issues with ourselves, is to recognize it in other people. Obviously, judging and criticizing other people, way more fun than looking at yourself. But that is the step. That is the lens into, take that lens, put it back on you. Okay, this is what I'm doing. Crap, now I feel like a jerk. Well, you are a jerk. Join the club, the jerk club. And the next question is about how past trauma affects an entire group of people on a cultural level. So he's asking, why are some groups like Asians and Jews, who have clearly been repressed in the past, why are they doing well, and then other groups are experienced to similar kinds of cultural pressures, but they're not doing so well? What's going on? And is this really about race? Well, I think I was talking about this with Derek on the Brazen Heads this week. I guess Sam Harris was talking about it. He listened to Sam Harris' podcast. We were talking about what Sam Harris says. But I guess, it's the same thing that I say about psychological research. I think there will there will be a day where we can do research in the lab, and then science will go from a soft science to a hard science. We're doing that now. It's really more of a pretense because we just don't have the technology to zero in on all the variables that affect the human mind. The brain and how that manifests as the mind. I mean, it's just too complicated. We do not have the technology to really figure it out. I mean, we have like self-report sheets. I know we get like facial recognition, and we can see what somebody's emotion is by their reaction to it. And that is more helpful, of course, and more accurate. But there's still, why are you feeling that emotion? There's too many variables there to really nail down solid psychological research. That's part of the replication crisis. I don't think it's people being lazy. It's just they're trying to do something that we just simply don't have the technology to do. And I don't know what that technology is going to... It's not going to look like an fMRI. I mean, fMRI is like a good... fMRI, that's like the... You go back to medieval barbers, and what they would do is like just bleed people out. There's a great old SNL skit with Steve Martin, Theodoric of York, and he just recommended bleedings to everybody. When we look back on fMRIs in 500 years, that's how we're going to have the same reaction as we now look back on medieval barbers, just bleeding people who get sick. It's going to look that silly. Just that not... These guys were coming to conclusions based on fMRI, and that's a whole other thing. I don't need to go in there. They were making court decisions. They were convincing juries of a certain thing because of an fMRI. Oh my God, it's just terrible. And this was the best justice system in the world. I mean, this is the best they could have done. Let's not go down to Guatemala, see how it was working there. Those are our ancestors or our kin in 500 years. So, why do some groups do better? There's lots of reasons, probably. The only question is, why do we focus on the ones that we can't change? Right? I mean, why is race politicized? I'm not saying race doesn't matter. I'm not saying people don't have perhaps different experiences because of, being a minority. I totally get that. That is all completely valid emotionally. I'm not denying that, but why do we focus on the one variable that we cannot change? Why do we politicize the one variable, race, that we cannot change? Well, it's because you can't change it. There's more power in that, right? Going back to what I was talking about in the previous question. Why do you focus on CNN? The tabloid media, because it makes you feel like you can't do anything. And it makes you afraid. And when you're afraid, you're easier to be led. So why would politics focus on one of the variables that influences a culture that you can't change, like race, skin color? Because you can't change it. You can create a political platform off of that. I don't want to get too... it's not about politics, though. I mean, why, if you're a short guy who's having a difficult time with women, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on being emotionally present and what kind of girl would be good for me, and building up your boundary, strengthening your boundary, your identity? No, you're focused on, I'm short. Girls don't like me because I'm short. Why are you focused on that one variable? And by the way, I think that's true. You're just like, I think the race thing is true. But why are you focusing on that one? And we don't even know to the extent that really matters. Of course, if you ask any girl, do you prefer a shorter guy or a taller guy? She's going to say taller guy. But why are you focusing on that one thing? Your goal is to get 3 girlfriends. You can do that at a lot of different heights. It's going to be more difficult if you're 5'6", of course. Because you want the self-pity, right? You want that payoff. You're not engaging with reality in a beneficial way. Nobody's really talked to you how to do it. Talk to you about how your emotions work. So that's what you're just going to tune out from it. There's lots of, reasons why the black community isn't doing well. I mean, racism could definitely be a part of it. We can't say for sure. We just don't know. It could very well be. There could be 100 other variables. I mean, if we're just going to be objective about this, sorry if that sounds political, but that's just the truth. Like the absent father things. That's a serious issue. Why is when LeBron goes out and talks about this, why does he talk about how black people are being hunted in the streets, which is just ostensibly not true? Emotionally, I get that may feel true, especially if you're hooked on Fox News and CNN. But that's simply not what's going on. Why is he not talking about single fathers? Right? Why is he not talking about, even just sex abuse? Something that nobody really talks about, just sexual abuse in the black community. I mean, it's a lot higher. That could explain a lot of it. We know how sexual abuse affects especially kids and how that trauma and how people manifest that trauma later on, especially in violence. I mean, it could be a sex abuse thing. Maybe it has nothing to do with race. But the real issue is, why do we focus on the race? It's the same thing why you focus on CNN. This isn't to criticize black people or, the do-gooder white liberals who are doing the whole anti-racism thing. It's not that. It's to say we all do that. And you think we're going to work through this if you're busy saying, oh, you're the ones who do it, you're the ones with the poor epistemology, the worse emotional regulation, and that's why you have the wrong conclusions. We all do it to some degree. It's not about demonizing anybody for doing one thing or another. That just psychologically, it's not going to help. And it's not true. I mean, it's simply not true. And it's not going to help because it's not true, I would argue. It's just a strange thing for me to talk about. Just where I'm coming from. I know, I follow people on the left and the right on Twitter, and, the right's doing the race thing too. The far right, and of course it's not endorsed by the RNC, like the anti-racism is at least endorsed implicitly by the DNC. So I don't think it's the same thing right now. But the race card is being played a lot on the right now, and I just don't, just personally, my personal reaction to it is I don't really get it. I know it's like the typical white liberal annoying thing to say is, oh, I don't see race. No, I do see race. I do see that people are different races, but I don't know. There's just like this tribalism thing in me that it's like a gene. Like, I don't know. I'm a guy and I guess I'm straight, but I just don't care about cars. I don't really care about cars that much. I mean, I think it's interesting to some degree, but I just don't have that gene. That's how I explain it. Like, I just miss that gene. And I miss the tribalism gene. I miss the caring about people because they're white gene. Maybe it's because I'm not exactly white. I don't know. I just present as white, so like a mix of different things from Middle East and Eastern Europe. I just kind of put them together, and it looks sort of white, like a white guy with a big nose, off white. But I just kind of missed it. Like I missed we just watched this documentary that Derek recommended on the Brazen Heads, "Give Me Shelter." It's about this free concert in December of 1969 that the Rolling Stones put on. I guess it was supposed to be it was billed as the Woodstock of the East. And there's a stabbing there. The Hell's Angel stabbed a guy who had a gun. And the way the documentary, there were no interviews. It was just an experiential film of, so there was some negotiation of what speedway they would use for it. They were originally going to do it in Golden Gate Park, but they ended up going to some speedway, I think, by Berkeley or out east in East Bay. And there are no interviews about this process. It's just guys talking on the phone. Very experiential. And I just had a difficult time paying attention because, I need words. I need people analyzing what's going on. I don't know if that's not a good analogy. So, yeah, what was your question? Why do some groups do better? There's lots of reasons. There's lots of reasons when we don't know. And I don't think figuring out exactly why some groups do better is really going to help that much. I think there are probably differences between groups. I'm not going to say too much about that. But why are we focusing on the issues, on the differences that we can't change? That's the issue. That's what's really important. And if we're going to learn anything from this, whatever race issues we're going through right now, that's what we need to ask ourselves. All right, I have two more here. We'll see. This next one is, should work always be meaningful? This guy has a job and he's doing meaningful things in the rest of his life. Like, he's working through emotional issues that he has. But does work really need to be meaningful? Sorry, I was getting distracted by something. Well, no, it doesn't need to be meaningful, but just because it isn't meaningful doesn't mean you can't create meaning in it. So, okay, now you see it as a way to support your family so you can connect more with your children, right? That would be a great meaning of work, even if the work itself isn't meaningful. Now, I think it's great to make work as meaningful as you possibly can. I mean, there's really two ways of doing that. So just comment, oh, I'm stuck at this job. I don't really know what I should be doing. I just know I don't like this. Well, where you start is you try to make that job as meaningful as possible. And the way to do that is to incorporate your own values into the work that you're doing. So let's say you're working in advertising, and let's say you're into nature or into hiking. Okay, how do you use like the current trends about nature and hiking? How do you use nature and hiking to sell whatever product you're selling? Maybe something like that. Or you like an author. You have a particular affinity for a certain author. How do you incorporate his kind of word usages in the ad copy? Something like that. It's how do you make it more you? I mean, I do think, advertising, ever since Bill Hicks, the Gen X abortion that is Bill Hicks, we think marketing and advertising is terrible. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's awesome. It's just another way to communicate. How can you maybe use advertising in a more ethical way? It's really just advertising's communication. Maybe you can see it as that. Okay, so communication is important for you. You're working in advertising. How do you create just better communication? Maybe you're upset about the way the media is playing things up and making everything emotional. Maybe you can flip that on its head. I mean, obviously you need emotions to sell ads, or you need emotions to get people to make a decision. We don't have decisions. We don't have actions without emotions. But maybe there's a way to incorporate that somehow. And, another way to make your work meaningful, if there's really no way of leaving and you're not sure what else to do, is just to get good at it. Maybe the reason why you don't like your job is you're just not as good at it. Maybe you're good enough so they don't fire you. They didn't furlough you during the COVID thing, but you could be better. And I can pretty much guarantee the better you are at the job, the more effort you put into it, the more meaningful it's going to be. It's just more of your life. It's just taking up more of your life, more conscientious attention. It's going to mean more. I mean, that's just another way of saying the first point. You're just going to invariably infuse your values into your work when you put more effort into it. A lot of guys, you just get this into this mindset of, oh, I have this stupid corporate job and I don't like it, and oh, it's so terrible. I need to do something else. Maybe you don't need to do something else, unless there's something specific that you really want to work on. Now, my past is a little bit different because I was working in advertising. That's why I bring it up as an example. And it was fine. Psychology, it was something that I pretty much described the process in that article, Anatomy of a Midlife Crisis. I since went through a midlife crisis when I was 27. When I got into psychology. That was a difference. My life would have been a lot easier, though, if I would have just gotten better at advertising and marketing and incorporating more of my values. That's for sure. But yeah, so we think, oh, I have this corporate job, I don't like it. Maybe you just have to put more effort into the job. Honestly. And that's a difficult thing because we want to criticize the job, go into the path, what I was talking about with the media. And why do we focus on race when it's only one variable out of 100? Because we want the payoff. Now, when you tell yourself that the job is the reason why you're unhappy and you don't have a girlfriend and, whatever, you're stuck in this crappy place, then, right, that's your payoff. Yep. That's your reward that you get for not engaging with reality in a correct way. So a lot of what you could do to make a job more meaningful is just to put more effort into it. But then you lose the payoff. Then you don't know who you are. And once you lose the payoff, now you're engaged in this process of figuring out more of who you are. And you're going to be much more likely, if you do want to change your career, at least to what? To do that. To do it in a way, going back to what we were talking about, want versus need, to know that it's really a need and maybe not so much a want. Because if you hate your job and you pick a new career because you hate your job, you don't know if you're just trying to avoid that job. Same thing. Are you growing? Exactly what we talked about last week with how do you break up with your girlfriend? How do you do it in a way that is going to be the most healthy? Well, are you growing out of the relationship? Or are you just leaving the relationship? Are you growing out of the job? Did you outgrow the job, or are you just cutting off? Going, oh, this is too painful, I don't even want to look at it. Oh, my boss is such a jerk, I'm just not going to talk with him. Same thing with friendships. You got a comment last week on one of the videos, like, yeah, you got to cut off people who are bad for you, toxic people. I agree, but not before you talk to them. You got to talk through those issues and figure out really why you're cutting them off. Maybe you're cutting them off not because of any issues they have. They may have the issue, but it's more about you not wanting to engage or you feeling comfortable talking about those issues that you have with them. That's why you left the friendship. Well, that's not it. Maybe if you would have talked to your buddy who's smoking too much pot or playing too many video games, maybe you could really help him and be like, yeah, you're right. I really got to turn my life around. Thank you for saying something. Maybe he's going to continue on his path and you do need to cut him off, but you can't make that decision until you solidify your boundary by talking, by communicating, by expressing your needs, not taking them as just wants and really looking at your needs. So yeah, you just got to grow out of a job. That's how you make it more meaningful. And that's how you go on to make the best decision going forward. The best decision that you can possibly make given your emotional awareness at the time. All right, we have one more question here, but I'll leave it there. Thank you guys for watching. I need more of your questions. Animus at animusempire.com. We do free 30-minute consultations. animusempire.com/schedule. Let you know what's going on. Just give you the best diagnosis I can give in 30 minutes, and then we'll go on from there. But yeah, ask me more questions. Twitter, you can DM me there. You guys know how to reach out. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the joy and pain that comes from being in touch with reality.